Welcome into this week's edition of the Research Corner. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Joe Antoshak. Joe, how's it going?
What's up, Tony? I'm doing well. How you doing?
You know, I can't complain here in Freight Alley. I think one of the interesting things we're studying right now is what's going on in the maritime market. We've got pulled up a chart here of our inbound ocean TEU volume index. Kind of walk us through what we're looking at.
Yeah, so we're looking at maritime imports specifically from China, and then also just into the U.S. As a whole. And there are some interesting things to look at. So first of all, I mean, what you see when you see this chart is these big dips here at the end. And right, China in particular, we're seeing a pretty marked dip. And a lot of that has to do with their National Day Golden Week. It's sort of a celebration of the establishment of the People's Republic of China, and we see similar effects as we do for like the Lunar New Year. So if you're familiar with that, you see just a big dip in imports coming from China to the U.S. So it's not totally unexpected. It's unfortunate for domestic freight transportation that we're not seeing, of course, a giant wave of import shipments that can save the U.S. trucking market, but it is at least expected. So that's one positive to take. We're sort of returning to the predictability of pre-COVID seasonality.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things, and you kind of alluded to it, right? There's not this wave. If you look at Lunar New Year earlier this year and the ramp up we saw from November into the end of January, right before Lunar New Year, we've been on this upward movement from China to the U.S., which is expected, right? You mentioned seasonal peak season is coming into effect. You can tell it's not near as peaky. We peaked out very similar, maybe a little bit higher than where we were around Lunar New Year. But the issue is we saw the peak, we saw it kind of steady, and now we see this decline. And I think one of the interesting things is how quickly do we bounce back? And we'll move to the next chart because it's our inbound or ocean bookings volume. So looking at bookings in advance of that TEU leaving, it's basically the day that it's given to the carrier, right? Saying, hey, we want space on this vessel, that booking. You see it start to bounce back. The question is going to be, how strong is this bounce back? Because this is going to be that upstream indicator of, hey, there is freight demand that's still going to be coming across the ocean in the next, call it 60 days.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And the other thing to note about this too is that that chart we were looking at first, IOTI.China to USA, excuse me, that is just now registering this drop, right? And we've been seeing a drop in the booking volume index for really a couple months now. It's been starting to dip there, and you do see it bounce back. But just the last thing I want to point out about booking volume is look at where Lunar New Year was in this chart, and then see where this one troughed out, right? Where this National Day Golden Week troughed out. And it's not that far away. So that sort of makes you think, okay, China to USA is, those volumes are going to dip in the data further than where they are now. One positive, it seems to be bouncing back here. And hopefully we will see a strong bounce back. And then, like you noted earlier, ideally you see increasing volumes up until the Lunar New Year comes around again in early 2024.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is you have to remember these two indexes both measure demand, but they measure it differently, right? One is bookings and one is actual TEU volumes. So what can happen is why we see this decline is that you see the number of bookings go down, but we'll move to the next chart and look at TEU volumes where they've kind of stayed the same chart we were looking at earlier, just in itself, relatively stable. So what this indicates is that on a TEU per shipment or per booking basis are up a little higher than what they were, say, a couple months ago. And I think that's something important to remember is you are measuring you're measuring demand overall, but it's measuring two separate things. And while we've seen that decline over the past couple months, there's really no decline. I mean, there was a little bit, but I mean, we've been relatively stable at these levels for quite some time. And I think that's what's quite interesting as we get into really the recovery out of Golden Week, as China manufacturing and the like turns back on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, I mean, the message really to take from maritime data, the maritime story this year, in my mind, has largely been, yes, we are far from the levels seen during the COVID freight boom, like the level of volume that we saw coming in from China in those days, obviously not sustainable. So we're down from there. But when you compare to pre-COVID to 2018, 2019, volumes have been pretty strong and consistently strong, and we've really just been climbing throughout the year. And I think that bodes well for U.S. freight transportation come 2024, because one, it's not like volume has just disappeared, like it's holding up pretty well. And then two, a return to the kind of predictability that seasonality allows is good for everyone involved in the supply chain, right? If you can understand what it's going to do, you can operate more efficiently, and ideally a little bit more cheaply.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, that's all the time we have for this week's edition of the Research Corner. Thank you so much for joining me. Right now, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more Freight Waves Now after.